On a Tuesday morning in May of 1959, that silence fell over a roadside diner on the highway south of Tucson, Arizona. The coffee was hot, the eggs were on the griddle, the booths were filling up with the kind of people who make a place feel real. Truckers, teachers, locals who'd been coming in long enough that they didn't need to look at the menu. And then something happened that wasn't supposed to happen in a place like that. And a man in the corner booth folded his newspaper and watched every second of it and didn't say a single word. Not yet. This is the story of Helen Cordova, and what happened after that silence broke. Before you understand what happened to her, you need to understand who she was, not as a character in someone else's story. As a person. Helen Cordova was 29 years old. She had been working the morning shift at the Cactus Rose Diner for 4 years. 4 years of 5 a.m. alarm clocks, of plates balanced on forearms, of remembering who took their coffee black and who needed a warm-up before they were ready to be talked to. She was the kind of waitress that good diners are quietly built around, the kind that makes the cook's job easier because she calls the orders clean and never mixes up a ticket, the kind that makes customers come back on purpose, not just out of habit. Her husband had left 2 winters before that morning, no goodbye that amounted to anything, just an absence where a person used to be, and 3 boys left behind who needed feeding, clothing, and some proof that the world had a floor under it. She had become that floor. She had $12 in her purse. Rent was coming due in 11 days. The youngest needed shoes for school. She'd promised the middle boy a baseball glove at Christmas and hadn't been able to deliver. The oldest was already old enough to understand what it meant when the coffee can on the kitchen shelf sat light. He'd learned to keep that understanding to himself. She kept that whole weight on her shoulders every single morning she walked into the Cactus Rose, tied on her apron, and got to work. She had never broken a plate. Not one. In 4 years, the school teachers knew her name. The long-haul truckers tipped her because she was good at what she did, not because they felt sorry for her. She didn't give anyone the chance to feel sorry for her. She had forgotten how to cry. Or maybe she had just decided she couldn't afford to. That's who was standing behind the counter on that Tuesday morning in May when a cattle rancher named Holloway walked through the door. Holloway wasn't new. He came in 3 times a week, sat heavy in his booth, ran up a tab that would have made a lesser establishment nervous. 6,000 acres east of town. The kind of man who moved through rooms like he expected them to rearrange themselves around him. He also hadn't paid that tab in 6 months. That morning, he walked past Helen's station and hit her with an open hand. Hard. Hard enough to leave a mark that would still be there by the time she sat down on the running board of her old Studebaker an hour later. He told her to bring his eggs faster. He called her something she never repeated to anyone, not once, in the rest of her life. Helen Cordova did not apologize. She set the coffee pot down. She looked Holloway straight and told him to keep his hands off of her. The boss heard it. He looked at Holloway, at that 6,000-acre tab, at the man who'd been eating on credit for half a year. Then he looked out at the dining room full of people pretending not to watch. And he did the arithmetic of a small man. He fired Helen on the spot, took her apron in front of everybody. Holloway went back to his eggs. The room found things to look at. Everyone except the man in the corner booth. He had been coming in every morning for 3 weeks. He sat at the same booth, ordered the same breakfast, eggs over easy, read his paper, drank his coffee, and tipped well. He wasn't loud about who he was. He didn't need to be. His name was John Wayne. He had been down the road at old Tucson studios filming Rio Bravo. The crew came and went. The production moved fast, but every morning before the cameras, before the makeup chair, before any of it, he was here, at his booth, being a regular customer at a highway diner where nobody made a fuss over him and the coffee was always strong. Helen was the one who remembered how he took his eggs. He watched every second of what happened that morning. He didn't stand up when Holloway made his move. He didn't call out from across the room. He didn't make a scene or demand the boss reconsider. He just sat with it. He folded the newspaper. He picked up his coffee. He watched Helen untie her apron behind the counter. He watched her fold it, corner to corner, the way someone folds something they were taught to respect, and set it on the stool. He watched her keep her chin up and her eyes dry in front of every person in that room and walk into the back kitchen without once looking like she needed saving. He watched that. He sat with it. And then he stood up slowly, put $1 on the table for the coffee, and walked to the counter. The boss was already wiping down the countertop, trying to put the morning back to normal. When he realized who was standing across from him, he started to smile. He started to smooth things over the way small men do after they've made a choice they already half regret. Wayne didn't let him get there. He looked at the folded apron on the stool. He looked over at Holloway's booth. He looked back at the boss. He asked one question: "Where does she live?" The boss hesitated. He didn't want to answer. Wayne didn't move, didn't raise his voice, didn't do anything except stay exactly where he was and wait. The boss gave him a street address on the South Tucson side. Wayne nodded once. He put his hat on. He walked to the door, past Holloway's booth without slowing down, without a glance, without a single word directed at the man eating eggs on a 6-month unpaid tab. Holloway didn't look up. Some part of him knew not to. The bell above the door rang. Wayne walked across the parking lot to his truck. He could see Helen sitting on the running board of her car, hands in her lap, staring south down the highway toward the border. He didn't walk over. He didn't say anything to her. He got in the truck. He drove back to the studio, and then he made 3 phone calls. This is the part of the story that people don't think about enough, because what came next wasn't a dramatic gesture. It wasn't a scene. There were no cameras on John Wayne when he picked up the phone in his trailer. Nobody was watching. He just did it. The first call went to the studio's land office. The second went to a bank in Tucson. The third went to a real estate man named Riggs, who worked the highway corridor and knew which properties along that road could move fast. Riggs took notes. Riggs made one more call of his own. By 2 in the afternoon, the boss of the Cactus Rose had a buyer standing at the door with cash money and paperwork. The boss was the kind of man who understood cash better than he understood almost anything else. He signed the deed before he read it twice. He had no idea whose name was funding the transaction. He didn't ask. Meanwhile, across town in the parking lot of the Cactus Rose, Holloway was standing in the heat next to a Cadillac that wouldn't start. A man in a denim work shirt had been bent over the engine when Holloway walked out, and when he stood up, he handed Holloway a distributor cap, said nothing, walked across the lot to a film set truck idling at the road, got in, and left. Holloway stood there in the dirt, holding his own car part, trying to figure out what had just happened. He would stand there for 3 hours. Someone had also called the studio to discuss where Holloway's lease line crossed the back 40 of studio land. Someone had reminded the relevant people that his right-of-way renewal was coming up in the fall. The studio was run by a man who did not look kindly on cattle ranchers, who left handprints on waitresses. The rest of Holloway's afternoon fell apart like paper in rain. 3 hours in that heat is a long time. Long enough to think about who you'd put your hands on that morning and what it had cost you. Helen had spent her day making calls. The bus station, the hospital laundry, a motel up the highway that was looking for cleaning staff. She wrote numbers on a piece of paper. She added them up in different orders, hoping they'd come out different. They didn't. She fed her boys. She sat at the kitchen table while they did their schoolwork, and she stared at the wall, and she did the math again. At 6:15 that evening, someone knocked on the door. Her 2 older boys were at the table. The youngest was asleep on the couch. She wiped her hands on the front of her dress and went to the door. John Wayne was standing on the porch, alone. No crew, no publicity man, no photographer. He had a brown paper envelope in one hand. In the other, lying flat on his open palm, was a large brass key with a paper tag tied to it by a short piece of string. He nodded. "Mrs. Cordova." She looked at him. She didn't say anything. "Yes, this is yours." He held the palm with the key out to her. She didn't move. He held it there. Whatever was on his face wasn't pity. It wasn't the expression of a man handing something down. It was the expression of a man who'd been thinking all afternoon about something that had gotten under his skin, and this was what the thinking had produced. She reached forward and took the key. He handed her the envelope. She held both of them. She looked up at his face. "What is this?" "The diner. It's yours now. Bought it from the boss this afternoon. The deed is in the envelope. Lease is paid through 1965. You manage it. You set the rules. Holloway doesn't come back through that door." She stood there. 1 second. 2, 3. "Mr. Wayne, I cannot." "Yes, you can. I don't have the money too. It's paid for." She looked at him. The question that came out of her next was the most honest thing she had said to anyone in a long time. Why? Wayne looked past her into the house. He could see the boys at the table, the small one on the couch. He looked back at her. Because nobody should put their hands on a woman bringing them their eggs. And because your boss should have stood up for you before I ever had to know your name. He put his hat on. He turned toward the steps. She stopped him. Mr. Wayne, I don't know how to run a diner. He looked back at her once. You've been running it for 4 years. The boss just had his name on the sign. He walked down the steps. He got in his truck. He drove into the desert evening and he did not come back. The Cactus Rose reopened on June 1st of June 1959, under a name that had always deserved to be on the door. Helen Cordova kept the cook. She kept the dishwasher. She let the boss go. She raised every waitress on her floor by 20 cents an hour, not because someone told her to, but because she understood to the marrow what that 20 cents meant at the end of a long week when the rent was close. She put a sign in the window, hand-painted. It said, "Truckers welcome. Veterans eat half price on Sundays." She set one rule that was never written down, but was understood by everyone who worked there. If a man put his hands on one of her girls, he was done. No conversation, no second chance. He was done. She enforced that rule twice in the first year. The first time was Holloway. The second time was a sheriff's deputy who tried his luck on a slow Tuesday and found out very quickly that the woman behind the counter was not operating under the same terms as the previous management. The town learned fast. The cook stayed for 15 years. The dishwasher's boy worked weekends through high school in the back kitchen. The middle Cordova boy started bussing tables on his 12th birthday. The counter was always full. The coffee was always hot. The eggs were always right. By 1965, the Cactus Rose was the top-grossing roadside diner between Phoenix and the border. She never raised a price more than once. She never closed on a holiday. She never asked a single customer where they came from before she handed them a menu. 22 years. That's how long the Cactus Rose ran under Helen Cordova's name. From June 1st, 1959 to 1981. Through 16,000 plates. Through 240 waitresses who came and went, and a handful who stayed long enough to become part of the place. Truckers ate there. School teachers ate there. Road crews ate there. 2 state governors passed through on separate occasions. An Apache tribal council held a luncheon at the big table in the back. 3 generations of Cordova children grew up, breathing the smell of that kitchen. Helen's oldest boy paid his way through the University of Arizona on money that diner earned. He became a public defender in Pima County, spent his career standing between people and systems that wanted to steamroll them. The middle boy joined the Air Force in 1968, flew 2 tours over Vietnam, and came home without a scratch. The youngest took over the kitchen in 1976 and learned to cook every recipe in the book his mother had written by hand over the years. A book she had kept updated the same way she kept everything, quietly, precisely, without any fuss. Not one day of rent paid to a landlord. Not 1 month of wondering whether the place would still be there in the morning. The deed sat in a safe behind the cash register. Helen looked at it once a year, every June 1st, the anniversary, before the morning shift started. She'd take out the card that had come inside the envelope that evening on her porch. She'd unfold it. She'd read the 4 words written on it in a large, unhurried hand. "You earned it, Duke." Then she'd fold it back up, put it in the safe, close the door, and go pour the first coffee of the day. She never told her sons what was on the card. She never told the reporter. She never told a single customer who pressed her about how a waitress who got fired on a Tuesday morning ended up owning the place she'd been fired from by Friday. She let the diner speak for itself. It did that just fine. Holloway spent the rest of his years watching everything he'd built come apart at the seams. The ranch got foreclosed. The right-of-way didn't renew. The money ran out in the particular way that money runs out for men who spend their whole lives assuming it won't. He ended up in a guest cottage on the edge of what used to be his land, living small and alone. When a reporter from the Tucson Citizen tracked him down decades later and asked about that morning in May of 1959, Holloway was a thin old man who wouldn't meet the journalist's eyes. He sat in the chair. He looked at his hands. He said one sentence on the record. "I made a mistake about who was sitting in the corner booth that morning." He wouldn't say anything else. He died 7 months later. No children, no surviving wife, no one at the service who hadn't been paid to be there. The ranch sold at auction. A school district bought part of it. A community college bought the rest. There is a parking lot now where his front porch used to be. The man who put his hands on a waitress and had her fired for speaking up ended up with exactly what that kind of life earns: a parking lot. Frank Donnelly had grown up going to Sunday breakfast at the Cactus Rose with his father. When the diner closed in 1981, and he watched Helen donate the original tin sign to the Tucson History Museum, he started asking questions the way reporters do when something doesn't quite add up and they need to know why. He found the cook, retired by then, down in Douglas, Arizona. He found two of the old waitresses, both of whom still wore the small gold cross necklace Helen had given to every new hire when they started. He found Holloway. He found enough. The story ran in the Sunday edition under the headline, "The Quietest Deed in Pima County." It ran above the fold. Wire services picked it up. 3 Western papers ran it. Helen got interview requests for months afterward. She declined everyone. She let the story stand on its own. She understood what John Wayne had understood that morning, that the thing you do matters. How loudly you announce it does not. Helen Cordova lived to be 91 years old. When she died in 2021, her sons went through her things the way sons do, carefully, slowly, in the particular grief of handling objects that still hold the shape of someone you love. In the back of her Bible, they found a photograph no one had ever seen before. A man in a tan, wide-brimmed hat, sitting at a diner counter, lifting a coffee cup. The angle of the shot was slightly off, the way photographs are when someone takes them quietly, not wanting to be noticed. On the back, in Helen's handwriting, the morning he came in for the last time. He left a quarter. He nodded at me. He never said a word. That was all she'd written. That was all she'd kept of it. Not the deed, not the key, not the card. She'd kept the ordinary moment. The man at the counter, the quarter on the table, the nod, the part that had nothing to do with what he gave her, the part that was just who he was. If you go to the Tucson History Museum today, climb to the 2nd floor, and walk into the Working Lives Gallery, you will find a faded red tin sign with rusted edges hanging on the wall. The placard beneath it reads, "Cactus Rose Diner, Tucson, Arizona, 1955 to 1981. Owned and operated by Helen Cordova, who managed the diner under her own name for 22 years, following a private gift from a working actor she served breakfast to in 1959. The actor's name does not appear on the placard. It does not appear in the deed. It was never part of the public record. He didn't put it there because he didn't need it there. He made 3 phone calls and bought a diner before lunch and drove out to a house on the South Tucson side at 6 in the evening and handed a key to a woman on her porch and told her she'd already been running the place. And then he got in his truck and went back to making a movie. That was it. No press, no story, no credit, just a man who saw something that was wrong, decided he was in a position to make it right, and did exactly that before anyone could talk him out of it. Here is what stays with me about this story. John Wayne didn't save Helen Cordova. He set something right that should never have been made wrong in the first place. There's a difference. Saving someone implies they couldn't have gotten there on their own. Setting something right means you recognize that the world handed them a crooked deal, and you've got the ability to straighten it. So you do. She ran that diner. She had been running it for 4 years before her name was ever on anything. She kept it going for 22 more. She raised 3 boys who went out into the world and built things. She fed thousands of people across 2 decades. She never asked for anything from anyone. He just made sure she didn't have to. That's a different thing than charity. That's a different thing than pity. That's someone who looked at a situation and asked the only question that matters when you have the power to act. Why isn't this already right? He could have signed the check for his coffee and walked out. He could have gone back to the set and thought about it on the drive and let it settle into that comfortable numbness that comes when you decide something is not your problem. He could have told himself it wasn't his place. A lot of people do exactly that, every day. In diners and offices and parking lots and meeting rooms all over this country. He didn't. He folded the newspaper. He asked a man for a street address. He picked up a phone. He drove out to a porch at 6 in the evening with a brass key in his hand. He did it quietly. He did it once. He drove away. And 22 years later, a woman who never cried after her husband left put a photograph in the back of her Bible of a man lifting a coffee cup at a counter. Not the deed, not the card, just the man, just the moment. That's how you know what actually mattered to her. Not the diner, not the key, not the 4 words on the card. The morning he came in for the last time, he left a quarter. He nodded. He never said a word. If this story moved something in you, pass it on. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that decency doesn't require an audience. That the right thing done quietly is still the right thing. That the people who hold everything together with both hands, who never break a plate, who fold their aprons corner to corner when they're handed an injustice, who sit on running boards staring at highways and do not cry, those people deserve a fair floor beneath them. John Wayne knew that. He made sure Helen Cordova had it. That's the story of the Cactus Rose.